Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to try and reverse engineer one of the absolute biggest mysteries of the human experience, romantic love. I mean, we all feel it, right? Poets write about it, musicians sing about it, but what actually is it? Well, today, we're going to strip away the poetry for a minute and look at love through the lens of hard science, psychological frameworks, and cross-cultural research. We're going to see exactly how our biology and our culture work together to shape our hearts.
Okay, let's dive right in. Here's our roadmap for today. We're hitting the universal question, the love triangle, your brain on love, history's changing heart, and finally, how culture shapes romance.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the universal question. Is love a global phenomenon?
You know, for a long time, some scholars actually viewed romantic love as just this entirely Western cultural invention, like basically a byproduct of 12th century European courtly love. But that brings us to a really fundamental question. What exactly is love? Is it just something we made up culturally, or is it an innate biological drive shared by literally every human on Earth? To figure that out, we have to look closely at the anthropological data. And wow, the data is pretty staggering. So anthropologists William Jankowiak and Edward Fisher did this landmark study where they examined 166 different cultures around the world. They were looking for clues, right? Things like love songs, tales of romance, people talking about the sheer anguish of infatuation. And what they found was that romantic love was present in 147 out of those 166 cultures. That is 88.5%. This pretty much totally crushed the idea that romance is just a Western invention, and it firmly established passionate love as a nearly universal human experience.
Moving on to Section 2, the love triangle, the psychological recipe of romance.
Psychologist Robert Sternberg came up with what he calls the triangular theory of love, and it brilliantly breaks down this massive, complicated emotion into three basic ingredients. The first one is intimacy. Think of this as the warm component of love. It refers to those incredible feelings of closeness, connectedness, and being truly bonded in a relationship. Basically, intimacy comes from deep emotional investment. It's that drive to look out for the person you love, knowing you can count on them when things get rough, and just having this deep, mutual understanding.
The second ingredient is passion. Now, if intimacy is the warm component, passion is absolutely the hot component. This is the drive that leads to romance, physical attraction, and sexual consummation. It gives you that motivational arousal and that intense, sometimes completely overwhelming longing to just be united with the other person. While intimacy is what keeps you close, passion is usually what draws you into the relationship in the very first place.
And the final ingredient is decision, or commitment. Sternberg calls this the cold component. In the short term, it's the actual cognitive decision that, yes, you love someone. And in the long term, it's the commitment to maintain that love. Now, it might not have the heat of passion, but it is absolutely crucial. Commitment is basically the cognitive glue that gets couples through the really hard times when, the passion inevitably ebbs and flows.
Now, what's really interesting about Sternberg's taxonomy here is how mixing and matching these three ingredients creates completely different types of relationships. Like if you only have intimacy, you just have liking, which is basically a standard friendship. But consider companionate love. That's intimacy plus commitment, but without the hot passion. This perfectly describes a lot of long-term marriages where the physical drive might have faded, but the emotional bond remains incredibly strong. On the flip side, if you only have passion and commitment without any real emotional intimacy, well, you get fatuous love. Think of your classic whirlwind, impulsive Vegas wedding. To get consummate love, which is the ultimate goal for a lot of people, you need the whole shebang, all three components firing together at once.
All right, Section 3, your brain on love, the biological hardwiring.
So while psychology gives us a neat framework for our feelings, neuroscience actually proves that passionate love is an innate survival mechanism, totally hardwired into our biology. When researchers took fMRI scans of people who were deeply in love, they found something completely wild. Passionate love actually suppresses activity in the areas of the brain responsible for critical thought. I mean, love literally makes us a bit blind. And even more remarkably, the deactivation patterns, the parts of the brain that cool down, are almost identical to the patterns seen in maternal love. And this brilliantly illustrates the other side of the coin, what actually lights up. Looking at a scan of a brain when someone is looking at their beloved, the area on the left is the ventral tegmental area, which is a super primitive part of the brain associated with intense euphoria and even addiction. And the area on the right is the prefrontal cortex, which is linked to reward and thinking. So being in love literally floods our primal reward systems.
So why on earth did we evolve this way? Well, these primitive biological systems actually serve massive evolutionary benefits. Think about it. Passionate love basically guarantees mate selection. It fosters the kind of long-term romantic relationships we need to successfully raise children. Ultimately, it ensures the survival of the human species by activating these deep euphoria and reward systems that keep us coming back to our partners. We are, quite literally, biologically hardwired to crave this connection.
Which brings us to Section 4, History's Changing Heart, the evolution of romantic attitudes. Now, while the biological hardware of passion is universal, the societal expression of love, the software, if you will, fluctuates wildly over time. Let's look at how this builds by tracking China's dramatic historical shifts when it comes to romance. Way back in 1680 BCE, ancient texts actually showed that love and sexual pleasure were viewed as the great joys of life. But fast forward 1,000 years to the Neo-Confucian era, and we see severe repression. Marriages became strictly for procreation, and public affection was practically forbidden. Then jump to 1949, and strict communist policies demanded this total renunciation of the heart, prioritizing the collective state over any individual romantic happiness. Believe it or not, love was actually described in an official booklet as a waste of time. Yet by the 1990s, rapid liberalization completely transformed Chinese romantic views all over again. This is a perfect example proving that while passion is biological, romance as we know it is a highly fluid, culturally constructed concept.
And that leads us right into Section 5, how culture shapes romance, individualism versus collectivism.
So, the crucial point here is how modern cultural frameworks dictate whether we loudly declare our love from the rooftops or if we quietly prove it through our daily actions. Just look at how these two cultural models contrast. In individualistic cultures like the US, Britain, or Australia, love is expressed very explicitly and verbally. People say I love you constantly, right? Love is viewed as a bridge to escape individual isolation, and personal choice is totally paramount. But in collectivistic cultures like China, the Philippines, or Latin America, love is much more often expressed implicitly through actions, devotion, and shared hardships. Love is already deeply embedded in these massive existing family structures. You don't necessarily need to constantly declare it because your devotion is proven by your loyalty to the group. For example, a traditional Filipino family might see constantly saying I love you as a bit overly showy simply because true love is already understood and omnipresent.
So we've traveled from the deep structures of the human brain to the shifting tides of history and global culture. Which brings us to a final question. If love is an ancient, universal biological drive, is your romance truly yours? Or are your expectations, your declarations, and your relationships just a product of your culture? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this leaves you with a whole new way to think about the universal mystery of love.